afternoon, fellow citizens. Welcome to the Citizens Chat Show. Thank you very much for being part of this weekly conversation here every time. And we thank you also for being part of the conversation. This week, just like any other week, you know, we always have to say, please follow our conversation on our live medias, on our YouTube, on our Facebook, and Twitter, on our hashtag, the Chat Show UG. My name is Masesa Demiano, and today it's an exciting week, and we've been seeing a lot of activity around the budget, the cabinet, the new cabinet, the budget speech that happened. We are also in the fear of COVID and the surging numbers of COVID cases. We also have, of course, then we shall also have a discussion on the freedom of association, expression, and assembly in Uganda. So joining the panel is a team of my interesting, of course, the two guests that I have today, and of course my constant panelists. Yes, today we are joined by Xavier Ejoyi. He's the country director of Action Aid Uganda. Xavier, you're welcome. Seated just right.
Thank you, Demiano. I'm pleased to be here.
Yeah, thank you very much. Then also Luke Owoyesigyire is the spokesperson, deputy spokesperson of Kampala Metropolitan. Luke, you welcome again. This is the second time. Yeah.
Thank you, Demian.
Yes.
I'm proud to be here again.
Oh, thank you very much, Luke. Also, Sarah Bireete, the executive director of the Center for Constitutional Governance. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you, and good afternoon, viewers.
Then finally is Joseph Ochieno. He's a UPC leadership contestant. Yeah, yeah.
Mr. President, yes.
Yeah, UPC president. Good to see you, Joseph.
How many are there now?
Litigation issues.
Yes, straight into the debate. Actually, into the conversation, let's have these perspectives coming. Just this week, we had the cabinet released, finally. And of course, the president sent out what he felt could be his best lineup. To start with you, Xavier, do you think this would be his winning team this time round?
I think the president has chosen what he perceives to be his winning team. From my perspective, I think the work for the current, now constituted cabinet is clearly cut out, and there are things that are there to be done, and I will want to weigh them against what they are going to respond to in the current context of things. Just to highlight, first, the resurgence of the COVID-19 situation. A year and almost a half down the road, this version of COVID has come hitting hard on Ugandans, the people, but also the economy, which is the second thing that I think the cabinet will be gauged on. The budget is being read today, but the economy is doing badly. So as to how the government now constituted composes itself to respond to the dire economic situation that we are in today. I mean, if you want to see that we're not doing well economically, you just go around the central business district or in the neighborhoods in Kampala, and you just see count the number of houses that have the subscription to let on them. That gives you a clear picture of what is going on. The third area, which the citizens really of Uganda will look to this cabinet, is on service delivery. The health sector, education sector have been exposed by this pandemic. Our vulnerability has been let out for the citizens to experience. And so therefore, how this government is going to respond to that brings us the question whether the team that has been set up to be in cabinet is up to the task. As I said, the task is clear. We've seen new faces in cabinet, quite a number of them, others of a younger generation, and therefore, going forward, they will be tested as to whether they will measure up to the tasks, as I said, that are clearly laid out. The expectations of citizens are major. Citizens, as they should, require accountability from the state. And I think that there is no room for error in this time. We've come out of a contentious and contested election, and I think that it is time for whoever has come into cabinet to be able to assert themselves and perform. As I say, the options are limited. The final thing I want to say is that we would want to see, after 35 years of NRM, I'm still studying the list of members in the cabinet. We want to see whether there's a clear trajectory of transition from the government that we have into the near future from the cabinet lineup. So that's something that we'll want to see, because it speaks a lot about the stability of this state, how things can move from one leader to another, and how Ugandans are able to rise up and participate fully in the governance of this country. And the leaders play a role in that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Xavier. And possibly, maybe Sarah, would you want to come in and also have a take on this?
Briefly is, to say that the Constitution gives the president the prerogative to decide who he wants to work with in that arm of government. And he has laid out his team. He said this will be a term like no other. It's a term, taking us to his 40 years of leadership. And he has highlighted his focus for this term: socio-economic transformation driven by increased household incomes through the parish model, regional integration for broader markets, fighting corruption, which is the elephant in the room in his government, and many other interventions that he has highlighted in his swearing-in speech, and as well as the State of Nation address. On the side of women, we are glad that the numbers increased. Whether the numbers will translate into action is another matter. For now, we are celebrating the numbers. I have always emphasized that with the women empowerment struggle, the numbers are important in terms of being symbols to allow the girl child to dream, but also in terms of statistical balance. We are 51% of this population as women, so we want to see the numbers there. Whether the numbers now deliver to their constituency, we shall come and evaluate maybe the first 100 days, the first year of performance of the women empowered cabinet, but we are celebrating the numbers. There has been debate on whether people qualify, in that cabinet or not, the individual competencies. As a Center for Constitutional Governance, really the constitutional threshold is that whoever qualifies to be an MP can be a minister and can be a president. So beyond that, you leave choices of those with power to make them on the part of the voter as to who becomes an MP, and on the part of the president as to who he chooses for cabinet. Whether people were fit for the positions or not will come from the evaluation of the performance of cabinet. But for now, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. We wish them well.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Sarah, for being spot on that. Let me straight to Joseph. Yeah, Luke will come in later, but straight to you, Joseph. What do you think now? For you, of course, you're already a president in your own right from your party. Yes.
Yes.
What is your take on the cabinet?
No, I think as to link up with what Sarah said, the prerogative to appoint a cabinet is one in the hands of the chairman, in this case, the person who would be the president, who's Mr. Museveni, who rules this country and has got a contested mandate. That's why I'm struggling with the word president. But he's in charge of our country, and I recognize him, in that sense. As a UPC, definitely, as Sarah says, I would be delighted that women have a substantially enhanced position, not only in position of cabinet and leadership. I contributed to to the amendment of the constitution of UPC. The challenge that I saw in UPC, maybe I may link it with I think part of what Sarah is saying, I'm still sticking to Sarah, is one, translating the constitutional provisions into numbers. In UPC, I am still quite concerned that at grassroots levels, we struggle with mainstreaming more women, youth, yes, than its constitution provides for about 62 thereabout%. So there is no reason why it shouldn't be about 70% today of young people and women in our constitution. I want to be able to see that, number one. Number two, then comes the engagement, constructive engagements. I've been very critical about, I'm a feminist, by the way, as you know, but I've been very critical about this thing where we have women in position, and I always usually wonder whether or not they sufficiently encourage, empower, and act as genuine role models to other girl child, particularly encouraging them to emerge. But number two, which is much more of a delivery issue, whether or not in the course of that, in this case a government, that they've got the capacity and the opportunity to be able to translate what their own wishes and visions are and to deliver, particularly in this case, in education, health, and the basic social services. Most women, and indeed for us, as a socialist, would like to say, to see. Part of the problem with this government, this regime, is that possibly most of the things that happened around cabinet table was neither here nor there. And this is a regime unlike Milton Obote's, where a minister is allowed to deliver. In fact, a PS is in charge of the ministry. This thing is very much controlled from the rear, Sarah. And I think you're right. I think I'll name here names that the biggest concern has been whether or not the new PM, Prime Minister, is fit for her job. And I'm delighted that you've actually given a concrete backing in a very definitive way. Your context before coming to the program didn't really hit to me hard. That very quickly, and maybe it can even become a crude class thing of how you look, how you present yourself, and so we talk down an average citizen who's done rather well, apparently, in her community, in a constituency over the last several years. Now, whether or not then that is translated in an ability to hold cabinet together, to hold a team together and then deliver, is a different issue, which is a basic part of the concern. But knowing very well that this NRM cabinet is one which deals on the basis of the instruction from State House, maybe we may just about be surprised. After all, that if the Prime Minister is actually ensuring that she's enforcing an instruction from the top, it will just about happen. But that said, I think generally I agree with Xavier that what this country needs is evidence that we've gone beyond 30 years, we've gone beyond 35 years, and that a 40th year of Museveni will leave a mark on our communities. Whether we like it or not, there is an absolute lack of investment in education, absolute lack of investment in health, absolute lack of structural investment in infrastructure. And usually when we talk about infrastructure, we see about some of these other funny roads that we see around towns that by and large don't really make and mean senses to our people. Infrastructure is not about roads only. Infrastructure is about rails, about housing, is about everything else beyond what we presented. I think there is still a lot of work that needs to be done beyond that. And then finally, I hope that Luke is coming, that these guys invest substantially in equipping, training, and leading the police, so that in the next 5 years, that law enforcement in this country should be the role and responsibility of civil police, not the army. And I hope, Mr. Museveni, after the 40th year, you send soldiers to the police, claiming that you're sending them there to go and, to create, to discipline or to institutionalize, as if the institutional building is a preserve of the army. You've done that, and you've done that for quite a few years. I think let the police grow, let the police do their job, let the police become accountable, and let's reach a situation in which citizens of this country have the confidence to be able to go and report matters of concern to them, to the police, and the police are sufficiently equipped, including those who's in Nagongera, that at least they can also have a vehicle. Nagongera police station Nagongera is the deputy town of Tororo. The police station doesn't have a car. And one average citizen in town here rolls with 6 lead cars with 10 police officers roaring around them. It is just a misuse of resources. These are some of the structural things that I'm sure will be able to impact on our ordinary citizens, and I'm sure that's what citizens of this country would want.
Thank you very much, Joseph. Look, I don't know whether you'd want to have a take on this on an individual capacity, but You know, this is politics. Yes.
We have seen, we also keenly observe the new leaders, the ministers that have been given the right to lead different ministries in their different capacities. And we do take note that we have a new line minister, and we shall work with him. We do have a lot of challenges, which of course will be forwarded to him through our administration, our normal administration, and we hope that some of the issues my colleague is raising, like a lack of police cars and also misuse of some of these resources, like he asserts, will be worked on in this new administration, in this new minister that we have gotten. That is all I can say about that.
No, thank you from that perspective. Possibly, let me get back to you, Xavier. Just because when the cabinet came out, there was the debate is around possibly the numbers, the increased numbers of cabinet, and possibly also the delay from the president to really select this cabinet list. Was it critical, or do you think that these numbers will also offer the kind of success he needs from this?
First of all, I think that the delay in appointing ministers was unnecessary. This country is in the middle of the most serious version of the pandemic that we are facing. We needed a health minister. You could see from the statement that was issued on Sunday that a few things. First of all, the statement delayed. It was supposed to have come on Wednesday, we were told, and then up to Sunday, yes, there was consultation between the different stakeholders in the task force. You might give that up. But I think that we should have gotten a cabinet in place immediately after swearing in of the president, at least to take on some of the key issues that, as I said, relating to how the health crisis that we're in is managed going forward. We need clear leadership, and not just from the Ministry of Health, but from education. Look at how schools closed down. I mean, that conversation should have happened at some stage. I could see some ministers tiptoeing and entering government cars, even when they were technically former ministers, and issuing press statements and things like that. So the point is that at least in the context in which you're operating, the appointment should have been done much earlier than that. But I understand that there has been a lot of jostling for positions among those newcomers who have caught the president's eye, and the old-timers who are looking to retain their positions. In fact, that jostling started way earlier during the primary elections, and we saw it reaching fever pitch during the election of the speaker. And I think that it was only wise the president, as he usually does, tries to juggle which region, which religion, which tribe, which age, and so on.
I think this time it didn't come out clearly in this cabinet. The region and the tribe,
It did come out clearly, perhaps not as you expected it. It was very clear that he was trying to. Somebody asked me, I said, it is there, but it's written like Sudoku. You know Sudoku? That game. You have to fill one to know what is in the next one. So you can read around and see if you filled this, will it be telling you about transition in 2026? If you filled this, will it be telling you about potential successors? If you ticked this, will it tell you about the representation of this region and how they performed during elections and so on? So there's a lot of puzzle around on the choice of the cabinet that perhaps we'll read as things go forward. But I think that it speaks to that. So I think from my side, the cabinet, first it should have been appointed earlier. As I said, But now that is in place, they should hit the ground running. And the expectations from citizens and the necessity of performance of a government are written all over, and we need to ensure that this cabinet rather measures up to the tasks laid ahead of them. So I think that let's see how this unfolds, but as I said, we saw a lot of things coming out from NRM, primaries, and then the election of the speaker, and so on. Credit to NRM, perhaps they are trying to behave like a party, and a political party. There should be debate, there should be contestation, there should be democracy. As to whether those are all there, I cannot say with precision. But as I said, during the election of the speakership, we saw night meetings, we saw people who came out who were not entirely happy, aggrieved, and things like that. So I think it is fine for those processes to shake the chaff out of a political system, to ensure that that political system is able to present and put its best feet forward for meeting the expectation of the citizens. As long as it is done transparently, to ensure that it is indeed the will of those who are supposed to ensure that the leaders who are taking the positions are answerable to the people. It is the president's cabinet, so it is up to the president to draw the marching orders on how this cabinet should perform. Ugandans will hold them accountable. My hope is that NRM will do better in assessing itself against the implementation of manifestos. They've been doing it themselves. The last time I saw the former Prime Minister announcing the performance was at around 95%. Yeah. I think it's in their interest to get an external reviewer to assess really how they are doing. Yes, they will say it is citizens who have given us another mandate and so on, but it will really be good for the health of the party in power and for the benefit of citizens, for the NRM, especially now that they have formed a government, they have a manifesto to implement. You know, we said Chisanja Hakuna Mchezo in 2016. It would be good to understand how come corruption, which was supposed to be a target of Chisanja Hakuna Mchezo, reared its ugly head and tore across through the economy of this country. How do you measure that and you say you score highly or lowly if you cannot with precision say we targeted this is where we ended? So I think that I invite the ruling government to consider having an external reviewer on the performance of cabinet. Just like newcomers to parliament, some of the new members of cabinet are yet to find their feet in the corridors of the ministries that they sit in, to understand how this country is doing. The Uganda Bureau of Statistics released a report at the beginning of this month, which showed that this country is doing badly, almost on all performance indicators. We are sliding. Poverty is increasing. Inequality is increasing. Service delivery. It is clearly shown in this, and COVID, from the statistics, affected the level of poverty by about 3 percentage points in less than a year. So that's something that we need to really focus on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Xavier. Sarah, just on the issue of manifesto implementation, we've seen the cabinet is almost seemingly inclusive. A whole vice chairperson of an opposition FDC is involved in their social media, part of the implementation. Do you think that it's an all-inclusive cabinet, but also do you think the numbers also will resonate to performance now that they increased?
Well, given that we are in a COVID pandemic that has shrunk the economy, both national and household economies have greatly reduced or drastically. URA has registered shortfalls in revenue collection for for 2 years, now. The budget, the new budget, incoming budget, analyzes COVID as the biggest risk for achieving the budget objectives. And so the ideal thing to do would have been to cut down on the administrative bill. But we see an increase with a demand to even increase the previously bloated cabinet to 80 members. Ugandans, there is a thinking that if you have a minister for women, then women issues are addressed. If you have a minister for children, then children issues are addressed. Then tomorrow you need a minister for borders and market dwellers. Then you need... So that thinking is really problematic. You don't need a huge cabinet to do effective service delivery. A huge cabinet, first of all, reduces the resource envelope. Maintaining a minister, some people might assume that being an MP and a minister, the cost is the same. But a minister comes with an office which needs a personal assistant, needs a bodyguard, needs a secretary, needs a convoy, a lead car, needs an official car, needs a spouse car. So a minister has 3 government vehicles, one for himself, one for his family, and a escort car. So that money, ministers have wardrobe allowance, among other things. Yes. So yes, they do, because they're supposed to dress in a certain manner, representing the country, the president in the country and the country outside Uganda. So it comes with a huge cost. That takes away the opportunity. You don't need a minister to take a hospital to my village. You do not need a minister to grade roads and ensure that schools are functional. You don't need. Kenya has a real cabinet. Kenya has a big population of 80 million, has a big economy, almost twice as ours, but has a smaller cabinet, half as ours. Tanzania has a smaller cabinet. These are economies bigger than Uganda. So we need to move. We need to move from that problematic mindset that you need, because the debate on increasing cabinet is on the minister for the elderly. First of all, you have anybody who is 65 years and above qualifies to go in the category of elderly. You have I think even Right Honorable Rebecca Kadaga is 66. So you have Right Honorable Kadaga, you have Moses Ali, you have other people like Honorable Kahindo Tafire. All of these people are elderly. So then you are fighting to say you want somebody else to address. Of course, I'm avoiding to name the president. But all these people are elderly. And then they want a specific person to address issues of the elderly. And the parliament has debated that the whole morning. So really, these are some of the things that do not add value to service delivery, which is a key function of cabinet.
Okay, just on the issue of service delivery also, just yesterday we saw the budget speech, read 2021-2022. And now we have COVID in between there. Do you think there are specific sectors that we should now focus on as in the budget as a country?
You know, the stimulus package for COVID should be twofold. One is keep businesses in place, because businesses are closing. Shopping arcades are empty, rentals are empty, citizens are going to the village. That's why the bus park was crowded, not only by students from closing schools, but many people in Kampala do not know how to cover rent, how to cover their meals, and the lockdown is going to worsen the situation. Many people were driven out of livelihood during the first lockdown. So when you do a partial lockdown, which we are in, and most likely to go into a total lockdown for the second time, how many more people are going to lose livelihood? And what should be the mitigating factors on the part of government? 80% of our economies are small and medium enterprises. They are the ones who are most greatly affected. There was money trying to mitigate people with loans in the banks, to give people loans to maintain the cash flow, but the manner of distribution was problematic. This is where this should be the critical area of approach by government. Make sure you keep businesses operational to employ people and to keep also paying tax. You maintain the tax base. But once you lose that tax and employment level, with businesses, companies closing, rentals closing, you lose rental tax, you lose pay as you earn, you lose purchasing power of the citizens, then you are greatly losing your economic base as a country. And that should be the critical area of approach. Saving lives, but also saving livelihoods of the citizens.
Thank you, Sarah. Joseph, right there. There are two issues in there. The numbers on the, of course, cabinet, which we've been engaging with, but also on COVID, which the critical areas you think really the budget should focus on or the country should focus on about this time?
I think, as Sarah said, it has to be both. For the COVID situations, it's almost obvious. You would expect that, considering the madness that we had last year, that by this time of the second wave, there would have been a sense of clarity from the government. And in fact, the manner in which they did it over the weekend, one, as Xavier suggests, that while there was mini consultations, very clear that by Sunday evening, there was insufficient consensus. The only thing is that, you can't read it simply because this thing is always about Museveni. But even from his own speech, you could see there wasn't consensus generally, number one. But number two, the shambles that followed the immediacy with which the whole thing was declared, and in particular, almost the criminal manner in which the whole thing was handled, particularly that situation that arose in bus parks, is one which I will hold Mr. Museveni accountable for going forward, particularly in the event that it happens that the people rushing to up country in the first 2 days of this take COVID, say from schools or from Kampala, to replace. There was absolutely no need. I'm delighted, though, that they listened. I don't give these guys credit anyhow. That the seemingly, the immediate reactive thing, but maybe thanks actually to television, that waking up in the morning, look, I was giving suggestions, and I think many of us, including Sarah, were suggesting that it was actually clear common sense, that this guy's meeting on Sunday would have used their heads that are paid huge amount of our monies, to say, look, we are closing schools. What are the likely technical issues to emerge? How are students going to come from Nabingo, Namagunga to Lubiri into Kampala and on their way to Chinoni or indeed to Kabale? Just as this clear thoughts, it was not thought about. So what were you sitting to think and plan about? Now, that is slightly much more beyond Museveni. Yeah. That should really be about the planners and these advisors here and there. But a decent advisor, a decent president, should also ask what are in the details. It's really not about him, but he should be able to say what are in place, including where the money is for this thing. Number one. Number two, actually, we suggested, as it was, that, and I don't know what happened with the last 2 days, police buses, military buses, prison buses, public sector buses, many of these other things. These are times when you mobilize these equipments, put them at public disposal. And you know what, Mr. Museveni, free advice to you, you get huge amount of political credit from the country out of it. And so it's a lost opportunity. But my worry, though, is that the likely impacts on that, because you see little kids, they eventually, that's what I'm trying to say, I'm giving them relative credit. Yeah, this thing should have happened much earlier. So I think that's important. And then number two, generally, last lockdown, Sarah, and we had a conversation about this, and there was even a time when I was out of the country yet, and we were saying that if it was managed properly, you could do it in such a manner that you mitigate these things going up country, and then you literally control Kampala. I think in the rush to this, we may just have about let it. But I don't want to be the naysayer. I really hope that it doesn't happen. But number two, then the economic element of it. I think I saw the responses of COVID around the world, and you don't need to be at Kampala these days with social media to see that prime ministers and presidents and ministers around the world, gave up their salaries and wages, cut down their pays to some cases mini zeros in support of the COVID processes, Business leaders did that. Huge. Those were the investments contributions people were making. In our case, you double the size of government, double the size of cabinet. Absolutely not necessary. So I think it's about how we are as a nation, where every major event is, I think, an opportunity to make money, and every other event, major event, crisis or otherwise, is an opportunity either to make name or to prove a point. I had suggested that COVID was possibly the nearest thing. It still is, Comrade Museveni. It still is that likely major national event that can actually bring us together for a sense of nationhood, where people can actually generally agree to work together. And it may just be about the kind of transition that Mr. Museveni, I'm sure he wants and he hopes so. If you look at his cabinet, what he's trying to do, he just doesn't know how to do it. Now try and please a bit of these northerners and easterners whom he used to beat up and try and make sure that it looks nice. He's trying to work that. We could see it. We just want to help you. Just be nice about it. But generally, economically, if rural Uganda is not massively impacted, how they strategically work out to make sure that agricultural produce and work continues in rural places should be important. But of course, that by and large will be about the livelihood in rural part of the country. What Sarah is talking about is how we strategically work in such a manner that if you like, the urban economy, the Kampala economy, which is the biggest economy, is sufficiently coordinated and managed in such a manner that the tax base is really not compromised. But since we depend continuously on aid and credit, who knows?
Thank you very much, Joseph. Look, would you want to come in there around COVID and have something to say on this?
First and foremost, it is a time that is always a bit challenging to us, as we had started settling in with enforcement, loosening up some of the guidelines. The catastrophe hit again, and I see us going back to the same situation in the future, and that is a place where we are tested again over and over on how we are going to handle the public. So we did, 2 days ago, like you've mentioned, I don't think this is something that any of us, maybe even the leaders, saw that it would happen. The issue of the taxi fares and the bus fares shooting up just like that. No one saw that coming. But I believe government did what it could in that shortest time possible. And I think the situation is currently under control, given the fact that this is actually the last day of traveling out of Kampala Metropolitan. And we are going to enforce, like I've said, the guidelines, but that is also a time where we are going also to be tested on how we handle issues of human rights. Of course, there will be a lot of issues here and there, but lucky enough, the President also did mention that other than arresting people, taking them to prisons, why not arrest them and give them fines to go back home? And that is also something that can give a test to the public. If you're just arrested, given a fine, and you go back home, how are you going to behave the following day? So I think most of the people were actually happy about it. They will be like, oh, it's okay, I can always pay money and do whatever I want, put a budget on the side. There's a lot of talk on social media about it. But, this is something that shows how we really need to take responsibility of whatever is going to happen in our lives in the time to come. Of course, we have gone back, regrouped, and a lot of briefing is going on, and we are starting tomorrow, a lot of these guidelines are going to be really enforced up to, and we won't leave any stone unturned. We are going to make sure that we enforce, but of course keeping in mind that we are dealing with humans, not animals. Yes.
Yeah, it makes a quick one to look, and in the first lockdown there were many issues of human rights violations, And then this lockdown, which is movement is limited per district. Some district boundaries are not known. Some people don't know which district they are even staying in, especially Kampala or Mukono. You rarely know whether you've crossed or not. I know that the president exempted that area as Greater Kampala, but I'm just using it as an example. With these new districts, where people don't even know, on voting day people were stuck as to where to vote from. How are you going to enforce that?
Like I said, what I know is that this enforcement is not going to be solely an issue for police. We are going to work with local administrators, and I believe these local administrators know these boundaries. And also the police, we do have...
There's a joke on social media that LODs will remind you.
Where your district stops.
The DPC is also supposed to be knowing his area of jurisdiction. So we always map those areas out. Every DPC in his office has a map of the area he controls. So if you're a DPC of Kakumiro, you know where Kakumiro stops. And that is what we understand. We know that every DPC knows where his or her district stops and where you share some of the boundaries with your neighbors. You will, because you see, like Kampala Metropolitan, some of the parts of Kampala Metropolitan clock into a bit of Mpigi. And where we do share that, the DPCs also know that they do share these areas with Mpigi, and they will put on those borders. And of course, people will also be guided who don't know. Like I said, we have to make our officers aware that they are dealing with humans, not animals. And humans also make mistakes.
And I think that's important, and I'm sort of delighted that Luke is referring to that. And Luke, please take this to your bosses. Mr. Museveni is one individual. This country is 40 plus millions. He would have been doing this with absolute, in good faith, because of the protection of our lives and property. The biggest issue about the enforcement that the citizens want is, these should be guidelines, It's not either or, So really, I think what we'd like to see from the police and political leaders, and I'm going to be observing, with this, we're going to be observing these things generally this time. The issue is, what are the exceptions? Last time round, I think you guys learned your lessons when people were being beaten up and all this kind of stuff, quite unnecessarily, Quite clearly, there will be some tragedies. Quite clearly, before you know, somebody is bereaved. Quite clearly, you know that this is somebody's border, as you rightly say. Some of these boundaries are really villages in a part. Do you necessarily need to say it's madness, you don't cross there? No, it's about, is it safe to cross? Is it reasonable? I'm sure this is what when the law is actually being applied, this is what the things are all about. What really is reasonable to try and mitigate these things? You then end up with the actions where, instead of thinking that you're enforcing the law, you're creating far worse situations like it happened at the beginning of last time.
Yeah, let me add that the recent concluded World Bank report on how Uganda managed COVID was that as much as Uganda saved COVID death, for every death saved, there were 4 infants murdered. The pregnant women who couldn't go to hospital, the people who were beaten on the road, the people who died giving birth, just on maternal mortality, on child mortality. For every COVID life we saved in the first phase, we lost 4 infants. So I think this should maybe message to share with colleagues the need for a human rights-based approach. If I need to go to hospital and I've gotten on the road, I think the enforcers should know that they are protecting spread of the pandemic. But this is an individual who is saying they must move. So first of all, they are risking their own life. What is the need? I know there are people who carelessly move. But if I'm on the road at night, for example, my child is sick in the night, you should ask yourself, do I wish to be on the road or be in my bed? Why am I on the road? Then if I've told you this is what is happening, then does it need force? Am I endangering any other person other than saving my child or household? So that's the spirit that should drive enforcement of COVID.
Thank you very much, Sarah and Joseph, for interjecting. As we are tending towards the break, I want you to, you're talking about human rights that came in clearly, but now we want to get into the freedoms also that we want to discuss. What is your general overview of the enjoyment of freedoms of expression and assembly and association in Uganda? Because now these ones will also be checked with the COVID.
Well, that is, we do, it is weird. Okay, the question is not weird, but I see a question like that is not applicable in the time we are living in. And that is, I wouldn't want to say that some of our officers might use that, but in most cases we have guidelines, and it will never fail to come up whenever we are handling issues to do with freedoms for assembly and freedoms of other types of freedoms. Expression and expressing, you can express your way in any other mean, but freedoms of assembly, that is something that has been currently checked during this pandemic that we have been in, and it is even becoming now worse. Given the fact that some of we got done with the political season, where some of these guidelines were loosened up, many violated, even some who actually now ministers were violating some of these guidelines. We were all seeing this. So it is something that has been checked, not because we want to check it, but because of the current situation that we are living in. There will be a seemingly not an easy situation, given the fact that we are currently now handling COVID-19 guidelines now, which is of course going to be a full gear handling of these guidelines. So we do of course keep in mind that some of these freedoms have to be respected, like expression and also assembly. But how do you assemble during this pandemic? We need to come out with we need to agree on how to assemble during this time of a pandemic. But you can express yourself, of course, keeping in mind that you have your freedom, but your freedom also has a limit. You should not overstep. We have seen a lot of journalists currently, some of them, not many. You do have a freedom to write or report, but some of them are being taken to courts of law for allegations of libel, defamation, and all of that. So we need to also know that yes, we do have freedoms to report this news. We have freedom to say whatever we want, but these freedoms also have limits in most cases. So that is all I can share about that.
Xavier, would you want to interject on this?
Sure, I do. I thank Luke for opening up on that matter, and indeed he's right. It's difficult to do law enforcement in a context that's such constrained. But I just want to say two things. One is that the police should know that they owe citizens a duty, and they need trust from citizens for them to accomplish law enforcement. If that trust is lost, which I'm not sure that it is at its highest peak in the Ugandan society today of law enforcement officers, and then there is a big challenge. Let me just give a simple example. The police play a critical role in enforcement of guidelines that have been put in place to ensure that we stop the spread of COVID. I don't think anyone in their sound mind should dispute that. And therefore, the police really need trust of the citizens to say that, if you did A, B, and C things, as has been laid out by the health officials, it would save lives in this country. Ugandans would listen to the police. But where they have lost that trust in one way or another, where police have said A and they have done B, where they put roadblocks and the emphasis is on some officers extorting money, asking for water, asking for tea, transport, rather than explaining to Ugandans, it is in your interest when we say that curfew starts at 9, this is the reason we're doing this. Bear with us, make sure you plan your journeys well, and rather than starting to beat up people and grabbing border borders, and now all of us, the police stations, you find border borders laying there. Are you having a conversation with border borders about their conduct so that they understand, rather than starting to run after them, grabbing them, bruising passengers who are sitting there? So it is important that that trust is built between police and citizens, because you play a critical role in law enforcement, and the trust of citizens will actually help you to achieve the goals that you pursue in law enforcement, and ultimately as a nation in putting a circle around this pandemic. So that's really the thing that I wanted to bring out. In policing, of course, there's what they call regime policing or democratic policing. A report that was done as way back as 2003 that I was part of. It's called the People, the Police, and the Politics. It clearly showed that the tendency, this is 2003, in policing in Uganda was tending towards more advancing the regime in place rather than law enforcement, which is actually technical. Our police are well trained. They excel when they go to peacekeeping missions in Darfur, in Somalia, in East Timor, in Ivory Coast. How come on the streets of our own cities they are struggling to adhere to their own law enforcement principles? How come? I think that it's important for the police to take their role seriously. The politicians can say whatever they want to say, whether they're in the ruling party or in the opposition, but we hold you accountable as police, as law enforcement officers, because as taxpayers, we spend substantial amounts of money in Kabalia, in Chibuli, in Lueza, training you with skills. Of course, sometimes you're given microseconds to make decisions, and which ends up resulting into violations. No one doubts that sometimes you have a microsecond to make a decision. The question is, whenever somebody violates a right, what is the mechanism of accountability, and how transparent is it to be able to speak to the citizens that indeed there was due diligence done, okay, and not shot at the crowd, live bullets, or things like that. And that if somebody indeed makes that mistake, we are seeing a transparent process of disciplining and prosecution, and that people are satisfied that this institution is indeed a public institution and is not something that is there to conceal violations against citizens. So that's really the challenge here, and I want to say that kindly appeal to you as police. Whatever the politicians say, whatever pressure they put on you, you who puts on the uniform with the badge of the country's flag on it, I think that you need to understand the expectations of the citizens, of your professional conduct in serving them. And as I said, if you put that before you, you'll actually amazingly realize how cooperative Ugandans are. But if they realize that they don't have full confidence in you, they'll try to use other ways. If they realize that with a few thousand shillings, they can buy their way around, and then they will also start to violate the measures put in place. So I think it's in the best interest that we need to meet halfway. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Xavier. I think right about that this time, let's have this very short break and return. I think you've tapped already, Luke and Xavier have already got us into the second part of our discussion, that is on freedoms of expression, assembly, and association, which were Uganda. So let's have this short break. But right there, kindly follow this debate. It's on Chat Show UG on our Twitter handle, hashtag. Please drop there your comments, drop there your thoughts, so that you'll be part of this conversation. On YouTube, kindly subscribe to the YouTube channel, be part of this conversation happening every week, you know. So let's have this short break and return. Thank you. Welcome back from the short break, and thank you very much for being with us throughout these conversations. Of course, we have been joined by a very interesting panel, but in there, while we broke off, I asked you that you could kindly have this conversation followed on our social media page, on Civic Space TV, on YouTube, but also on Facebook. It's live showing. You can subscribe. Please subscribe. Be part of these conversations every Friday. Be part of these conversations. Please be part of these conversations. Be part of the citizens of this country. This is where you're supposed to be, and have these conversations going with us. So thank you, my panelists. Again, I need to welcome you, Xavier, Sarah, Luke, and Joseph. Yeah, thank you very much for being here. And before we broke off, we had started a discussion on the freedoms and of expression, association, and assembly. Right there, Sarah, you wanted to have some interjection. You wanted to say something. But before you go in there, I want to ask you, is a problem of is a problem on the enforcement of these laws or regulation?
You know, I think it's important to note, Demian, that COVID complicates the enjoyment of freedom of association. It almost leaves us with the expression, and it takes our association, a bit of association and then assembly, but it leaves expression because the mediums we are here talking and sharing views, but assembly and association, physical association, then COVID automatically suspends or regulates that medium. But as a country, we were in court challenging Section 8, former Section 8 of the Public Order Management Act. And immediately it was outlawed in February, then COVID happened. COVID happened and the regulations almost maintained the outlawed Section 8 of POMA. And so we have an element of the laws. There are laws which contradict the Constitution, because as much as rights and freedoms should be limited, Article 44 is clear that the limitations should be what is acceptable in a free and democratic society. So once you have limitations that exceed the minimum thresholds of a free and democratic society, then they become contestable in courts of law, in implementation, and other things. Because as we know that fundamental rights and freedoms are inherent. So even somebody who does not know the law, it just feels natural that if I want to be here, I should be here. If I don't want and I'm not committing a crime, so I don't see a need why I shouldn't be where I want to be, if I'm not breaking any law. Because basically that is freedom of association. There is a rally, you want to listen to what people are saying, you move in. There is a gathering, a wedding, you are invited, that's your family, you move in. That is freedom of association and assembly. Expression, I want to say something. But we know there are limitations of defamation, there are limitations of, now we have a challenge of fake news that threatens freedom of association and access to information, and the way the media operates. But also we have seen aspects where fake news drives the truth faster, because then people come in to challenge fake news. But so fake news also serves the purpose of bringing out the truth.
Oh, yeah.
But legally we have 16 laws that contradict aspects of the Constitution. And the range of all these laws, including the UCC Act, the Uganda Communications Commission Act, because as we go to the aspect of expression, internet and social media. Now you move out even from police to UCC. UCC can work later with police, but the main regulator there is UCC. How do you regulate social media? We know that as we speak now, Facebook is banned in Uganda, Twitter is banned in Nigeria. We have internet shutdowns as and when the government deems it a security threat without disclosing the details of the security threat. Maybe Afande will let us in on that.
I see police updates on Facebook.
Yes, police is using Facebook, which is supposed to be banned. You are communicating to people on the banned platform.
That is not a question for you.
So we have all these dynamics playing in, and but recently when the security aspect came in, the Kampala killings and the role of the media, especially investigative media. So the BBC Africa Eye, a British Broadcasting Service Africa Eye, did a documentary on killings in Kampala, and they focused on 3 killings. So the documentary was called 3 Killings. I know there was a lot of debate on social media. Many people died. Why are you calling it 3 Killings? Without knowing the detail of why the title was 3 Killings, because they tried to trace the 3 people, among the people who died, these 3, how did they die? And then the documentary, of course, pins the killings on a police pickup. The number plate is mentioned on the documentary. Then the military that came in the next day and was even shooting into buildings. And somehow, if anybody was interested in delivering justice to the victims, it is a lead that can deliver who violated what. I know that the president on several occasions has contested the issue of stray bullets, saying there is no stray bullet. Because a stray bullet means you were hitting at target A, but you hit target B. So by the time you shoot into people, what was your target A before you say you hit target B? Because normally these deaths are claimed, no, those were stray bullets. So what was the main target for it to qualify to be a stray bullet? And I like the way the president has emphasized demystifying that concept of using live bullets into unarmed civilians, which is, of course, obviously wrong. But maybe there are challenges of crowd control. Like Xavier said, these people train for long. And when you are in foreign countries, Afande, you perform the best. Everybody knows we have the best.
Even when Jesus left his home,
The people are not appreciated at all.
Maybe blasphemy.
Yeah. So we need to know, are there challenges of crowd control? Then away from COVID. For example, I know the police was planning, they said they will appeal the decision on Section 8 on powers to, to allow or disallow. I would like to know from Afande, away from COVID, what is your main challenge in managing public assemblies? And why do you find the need to say you cannot provide security, which is your mandate? People want to assemble. Your duty is not to stop them, but your duty is to say you need to be secure, and this is how secure. So where does the problem come in?
Right there, I want you to just answer that question, and of course,
there are a couple of problems, and I believe in most cases I've always answered them whenever I come here. And the basic one that everyone sees with their eyes is the fact that some of the people that want to assemble, of course, many of them have good ideas, and they want them to be out there. They have good issues that probably even as fellow police officers are suffering from, and no one would really want to stop them from carrying on with whatever they are going to do. But at the end of the day, we have colleagues where the law says that we need to work together and just inform us, and we give the guidance. inform us where you're going to hold this rally or this procession, which roads are you going to use, and we give the guidance, because that is there in the law. And the guidance should be either the commander deems the place safe for that rally or gathering as per that moment, or a security concern, depending on maybe some of the reasons he will give. Of course, we have come out with some of those reasons where we have informed the people informing us that they want to hold these rallies or gatherings, that maybe you don't have permission from the owner of the venue. We have not provided that to us. And where you have provided that to us, we are like, this place is next to a what? To a school, to a public place, that maybe a market, maybe a main road, and it can become a danger to your people, to the people that are come to listen, that are going to come to listen to you in the future. And we always have these contestations, and you find someone will say, either way, I will do this. My plans are for tomorrow, and I will have to do this no matter what. And that's where the problem comes in, where I think it's basically communication. And at the end of the day, whenever they try and get maybe permissions, whenever they fail to get even the permission to secure the venues from the owners of the venues, they come out with conspiracy theories that we are calling owners of the venues, we are providing evidence and blocking them from behind, that they, at the end of the day, the owners of the venue also change their minds. So there's a lot of issues, but I think basically it's an issue of communication and making sure that we plan early, because most of these politicians come out with these ideas in 4 days, in 3 days, and it all needs planning, because if you're going to secure 1,000 people at a public rally, you need to plan. You won't just go at a police booth which has like 4 personnel and you say, okay, we have deployed you. We need to plan, and the fact that we're even in COVID currently, it even becomes a little bit hard to plan for such activities. But away from COVID, that has always been our reason, failing to understand each other with the politicians that are planning these activities.
But in most cases, you see those ones that are really blocked are really opposition. We've not seen any blocked protest.
But also another question I would like to ask Afande. The Public Order Management Act clearly limits this role in public gatherings in the open. But police has come in, even in our workshops, which are in hotels. Do you have police permission? Why don't you read the act and understand that it is talking of meetings in the open?
I think that is an issue to do with the officer really, who has come in. The laws are very clear. Like the laws are very clear. It is an open place, and where you have permission to do the activity inside, it is okay. It is very okay. But there is also an issue where we have information that maybe an activity that is going to take place inside the premise is probably a security threat.
Okay.
A security threat.
Yeah, in terms of how does that happen?
I might not explain that to your best understanding, but we have a couple of times gotten information that some of these activities, planning activities or meetings, are going to be a security threat in the future. And of course, in most cases where we have not gotten wind of these plans happening, and we get reports after they happen, we realize that maybe some of the issues they were discussing are indeed some issues to do with security, matters of security. And that's why we always emphasize on some people, not all of them. Of course, it might be it might be against what Bireete is saying, that it is not necessary, but we have had officers who will go there and would want to be part of these meetings. It might be against them, but we do know some groups who would want to gather and discuss matters which might be deemed security threats in the future, because we do get feedback.
Okay, but my interest would be, before he leaves this point, if you get this intelligence that the CCG meeting going to be convened at Sheraton is a security threat, what measures do you take?
Well, that is a very good question. I think what the intelligence officer needs to do, if the meeting is already ongoing, is to make sure that they be part of the meeting and find out some of the points that are being discussed. Not basically spying, but to also ascertain that maybe it was a rumor and this issue is not going to be a security threat, and they're stopping the CCG meeting from happening because it is just a rumor. They also need to have enough evidence. But where there is enough evidence before the meeting, because some of these meetings have become assembly points, you will find a group of people will say, we are meeting at this hotel, and later on we shall do our assembly to Parliament or to any government installation without even informing the police in your area that you're going to have a procession. So it is better you stop them from the meeting other than waiting for them to start. No. They have become assembly points, most of them. Yes, you can interject. No. But I'm not going to come here and lie to you that we are not doing that, yet it is happening.
Thank you, Comrade Luke, for confirming that, because you are doing it. Actually, there was a beginning bit, it was very, very interesting, very nice. It was extremely important that it's a citizen forum and we are having this conversation. I really wish actually all Ugandans actually got. I really wish that all Ugandans actually got all this from the beginning, because I think it's very, very important, including the clarifications made by Luke and then by our land sister Sarah. It is really the case that the public need to know that there is no law that requires them to go and seek permission from the police for many of these meetings.
I didn't talk about seeking permission.
No, you did not. But, no, you did not. And actually, I'm just trying to reinforce that, because that is sort of the perception. Last year, I had a press conference in which I was actually directed almost by a major news editor that was the requirement. Interestingly, the first time I went to the new police headquarters, and it was there in my conversation with these guys, the narrative was almost about seeking permission until the conversation ensued, and it was very clear that it's not about seeking permission. And as Luke actually clearly says, it is basically informing the police. That's number one. So it's really important. But number two, during my visit there, I gave you guys free advice, sort of insinuated by Sarah. And I think that's now your legal technicality issue. Point is, if you have intelligence that very likely Ochieno's 5-man meeting at CCG is going to turn into a 50, you are the law enforcement agency. Surely, don't you have capacity to reinforce your intelligence? Don't you have capacity to plan and ensure that in the unlikely event that the 5-person event turns criminal, you deal with it? And isn't that the case that you allow this thing to happen so that you get the evidence that you need? And isn't that the case that if you did that with the Ochienos at CCG, that's going to make a very good case for you next time Action Aid is actually doing it? That's really, that's what it should be. So the idea that you're actually doing preemptive action as if some guys are busy organizing to deactivate a landmine somewhere in Kabamba or Luero is neither here nor there. It actually helps deal with some of the point that, and Xavier, you're such a fantastic diplomat, I actually didn't know that you were the way you're actually presenting and making your points much earlier. The battles the police are facing with the public, in many cases are self-inflicted, but in many cases have actually been pushed by the state and the powers that be. And in many cases, actually, the citizens have got a right to have many of these reservations. And like, again, we've several advice, and for me as a political leader, and for my two colleagues, particularly as a civil society leaders, we must really say this on behalf of the citizens. It's absolutely not in our interests to push the citizens of this country against the most important, in my opinion, it's not the army. The army's job is to make sure that those guys from Bunia don't cross here. Actually, their job is really, really, really not to police Kampala streets. But I've said that very clear several times. But the police, it is your job to protect us and our properties day in and day out. And it should be absolute common sense if we disregard that and we don't cooperate. Number two, intelligence-led policing. That was again my point, and I made it at the police headquarters. Why don't you invest in intelligence-led policing? Point number three, why don't you lead on community-based policing? Those are really the two areas where you need to be able to make sure they invest. Public relations, neither here nor there. In fact, these days you guys are there like you're a police spokesperson. Those are really, for you, your job is, your jobs would be very easy, almost perhaps irrelevant, if the actions of your colleagues were such that actually they followed the law. And the final quick thing I want to say, point I want to make is that I've been in various different other countries. And actually the police, just like this Uganda when Demian was just been born, the early days of those days, police officers were partly feared, but on the other hand, genuinely very revered, respected people. I have a tiny little example I want to give, and I'm sorry for taking a bit of time. The first time I ever went in astray with the police was actually in London. Obviously, I went astray with the law here, which Museveni and these other guys still need to explain, because that was an arrest in Makerere University for no offense. It's now nearly 40 years. But I've never had these issues. But I was actually rushing to take a colleague to a bus station, and I drove on a bus lane. Now, these are three senior officers like my colleague here, and they're sitting in an unmarked car. So they actually drove into they did the lights, stopped me, said, yes, sir. Do you know what you've just done? I normally tell this to youth groups, particularly young men group who are very angry, especially angry at police officers. Say, no, it's just good, own up. I just came out, my decent suit, came out, looked up this guy, said, do you know what you've just done, sir? I said, yes, sir. The guy asked me, why did you do it? I said, I'm really sorry. And I was rushing across the river to drop my colleague at the coach station. I'm coming back to the other side of London to chair a panel for interviews, which was true. The guy looked me up and said, please don't do it. I respect these guys always, and I talk about it. Now, I technically broke the law. The guys gave me that opportunity. I have lived with it from my experience, and I use it actually to help mitigate many of these other things amongst many of my colleagues. So really, these are things that should be treated. But actually, back to this point, no. Allow these events to take place. If there is a crime, what kind of offense are they really? The fact that an opposition group is going to discuss how they're going to campaign and mobilize against Mr. Museveni, is that the crime? Surely, is it a crime? Absolutely not. Is it one which is related directly with the security around this country? Because here, the security question is about a threat to Mr. Museveni's political power, rather than even something to do with allegedly his life or his organization's life. And that is not a security thing, and that should not be this kind of thing that should be happening like this.
Party dispensation.
And then just a quick one. Actually,
parties should also engage.
Indeed. And look, many cases, including me as a political leader, I want at 9 o'clock in the night to have had an event at my party headquarters or in my offices or perhaps in my life, and to decide that I need to call a press conference tomorrow at 9 o'clock in the morning. Now, that's one of the basic rights I have and freedoms. So why should I now scheme that I wait for 3 days in order to be able to organize to make this expression, something that came up the previous night? No, I may want to be responding to Mr. Museveni's, the manner in which he managed the COVID lockdown overnight. So these things are actually just not, from a political point of view, they're actually genuinely not applicable. But I know, it is not up to you. But I also know that your seniors are watching, and you're the voice of it. Please take it back to these guys. We are really getting slightly much more tired and exhausted, with these things, and it's absolutely not necessary.
Yeah, at that point where you're getting tired, Xavier, yeah, you're a CSO leader, and you've been into the forefront of advocacy for a long time. But in a way of also trying to respond to what the discussion is all about, there's always conflict between the duty bearers and the rights holders. Where is the problem in there? Over the years, you've been at the forefront of this advocacy.
So I think, first of all, that we need to make it very clear that the roles are clear and the rights are very clear. Citizens have the right, and the way our laws are written, especially relating to the freedoms of expression and of assembly, they are there. The rights are inalienable. Why do they mean? It means that you cannot take it away from me. The urge to have my voice heard on a particular issue is not just because we have a democracy or we have been, it's written in law. It is a feeling inside. Let me just share a simple story that I got an opportunity to, in early 2000, I met a Libyan. He was here in Kampala. He told me, this is 2000. He told me, I asked him, how is Libya? He says, Libya is fine. So I asked him a number of questions, and he was able to tell me how economically the country was doing very well. I think they had excess houses. For even the unemployed would be paid salaries that were, I don't know, the allowances. That could be an equivalent of salaries and so on. Then I said, but he was not happy with the government in Libya. I said, why? You're doing very well. These are things we are struggling to have here. Then he said that, yes, I agree with you. These things are very good. But there's one thing that we don't have, that some Libyans, let me add, are not happy with. He says, we don't have freedom. I said, what do you mean? He said, we also want to be free. We want to think away from what others are thinking. But that is not allowed. It puzzled me at first, but I think 11 years later on, I understood what he meant. Okay? So you can have everything. You can be prospering economically. You can have everything, everyone telling you, yes, 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 yes. But inside them, there is an urge to have yourself and your voices heard. If you step on that, you suppress that in one way or another, it might appear calm, but inside you it is there. That is the reason the founders, okay, of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and other instruments put it down and thought that states need to ensure that citizens are able to enjoy these rights and have their voices heard and so on. And so that is where we are coming from. We are not asking for too much. It should not be looked at as a favor, an inconvenience, or a bother to a state. Those who run this state should realize that these are feelings, are rights inside us that we cannot do about. Citizens cannot do about that. And that the role of the state and institutions such as police is to allow the citizens and provide an environment for the citizens to enjoy those rights. If I may ask Afande Luke, when was the last time the police provided even a citizen, one citizen like myself, to go and stand in parliament with a placard, okay, written there, please don't approve loans without my permission. And they have police who are sitting there and saying, yes, you should be allowed to do that. When was that done? Or are you able to come up with your information that you have received that shows that my standing there is going to bring terrorists who are going to blast the House of Parliament? And moreover, it's good to receive intelligence information and in some cases keep it classified. But for transparency's sake, if it is going to curtail rights, and then there must be a means of accountability, because you can push that we have intelligence information under a carpet or blanket so that you use it to do anything else. So I think that is important. And we've also seen that I'm sure Afande knows these are orders from above. You know, what does that above mean? I wanted to make clear that sometimes that's what gives the impression to citizens that the police is acting under pressure from political influence rather than an independent, in fact, non-partisan or neutral professional law enforcement credentials, which, as I said, we respect. We know that decisions that you have to make, and if we have conversations with citizens, citizens will understand why you are doing certain things that way, but that explanation needs to be logical. If you shroud it in secrecy and say, we have intelligence information, and intelligence information becomes intelligence information. We see reports after reports of investigations not produced, cases not successfully prosecuted, and that is an indictment, really, on the role of police that we feel. And finally, as I close this, citizens actually, they are allies. In most cases where crime is involved, police is not necessarily at the scene of crime, but you piece evidence from who? From citizens. And so it is important that citizens are not seen as people who are enemies of the force or enemies of the state, but that they are people who are interested in law enforcement in a crime-free society. And so detaching yourself and laying a curtain of intelligence information that is secret really pushes away citizens, and in fact the issue of mistrust that I talked about earlier on becomes prominent. So I think it is important that in law enforcement, first respecting that the rights are inalienable, there are rights that are there in people, and secondly in doing your work even when you're trying to safeguard enjoyment of those rights. We admit the current context of COVID allows some restrictions that people should understand, but the history of the way police has conducted itself in the recent past, it really paints a bad image of the intentions, even in the current context, and that creates question marks. They say that the road to hell is paved with a murmur of good intentions. So you may have good intentions, but you are a road leading to hell. That's the perception that some citizens may have of a force that should be doing work that is enjoyed by all citizens. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Xavier. I know, Sarah, you'd want to pitch in a little, but try to narrow it down. Yeah? How are CSO actors and journalists, then artists, affected in the shrinking civic space context?
No, maybe first I'll begin with the creative industry. When you go under Section 2 of the Public Order Management Act, there are activities that are exempted from POMA, from the law. And it includes social, religious and cultural gatherings. We have seen the police implementing POMA on shows of musicians. These are social gatherings. And Section 2 is very clear. The social gatherings are not affected by Public Order Management Act. So I don't know the rationale of police implementing the law on a sector that is exempted in the same law. And I've never understood it. You see, you have not notified us according to POMA, you have not. We know we have the Public Entertainment Act, I think I'm missing the name, which is a bit draconian. But that is the law that applies to the artists and the creative sector. So when you get to the Public Order Management Act, which defines a meeting as that purpose called for debating a matter of public interest for purposes of influencing it or mobilizing around it, clearly. And then it goes ahead to exempt meetings which are indoor. It goes ahead to exempt social and cultural gatherings. We saw the tear gas of a cultural meeting somewhere during elections in Mpigi. Okay, they used the excuse of COVID. But still, police has been implementing a law on sectors that are exempted within the same law. Public Order Management Act is not a good law, but police has made it worse by doing your own law, other than that was passed by Parliament. So I don't even know the intention. And police has a very effective legal department with some of our colleagues. So, but away from that, you look at journalists. Journalists have other laws, including the Press and Journalists Act. Of course, having bad laws is a problem of Parliament. It is not the problem of the enforcers, because the enforcers don't make laws.
I think that's an important point, yes.
They use laws that have been made by legislators. So we cannot blame the bad laws of media on enforcement. The problem with the journalists now is an invisible control through licensing. For example, most media houses have temporary licenses because they are easy to revoke. All these main televisions have temporary 1-year license. Because revoking a temporary license, it means you were never confirmed, first of all. Whereas revoking a permanent license requires due process and court. A temporary license can be withdrawn as and when the licensor deems it fit. So we have this practice that has persisted, and it is an intentional control by the state on media freedoms in this country, keeping them on wonkenke. These are private investors. You know, there's a time when TV had a 1-month license. Can you imagine? 1 month. So they are.
Reminds me of our high school days when they said, your name is still written in the pencil.
Yes.
Around you.
So the regulator for media in this country, please. These are citizens. This is a profession. People have studied, have graduated in media and communication studies. The Constitution protects their profession. The Constitution protects their right to work. Why do you keep them, their work and livelihoods written in a pencil just because you want to control what everybody is saying on media? Of course, we had violations, which we discussed the other time, mainly by the army, which we can't now blame on the police, on the assault of the media. But these are some of the challenges. That licensing, that control, the draconian measures, the media councils are not properly constituted. So there is that lacuna in the whole regulation of media. When it comes to civil society, I think 2 days ago, the country woke up to news of NGOs that were going to be deregistered. Yeah. I have no problem with a regulator doing their work. And we have many regulators for several sectors, including some people are also deregistered in businesses, depending on what has happened and what they have failed to comply. But the grand announcement and posturing, the relations in this country, especially for civil society, there has been a narrative that civil society has too much money, drives huge vehicles, like you are eating people's money and they are disturbing the government. So the narrative is that that you are promoting a foreign agenda, you are working for regime change, you are not accountable, you have too much money. That is what, when you tell an ordinary person that this is a civil society leader, that is how the public looks at you. So you come up and announce that we are going to deregister, grand announcements, organizations that were not complying or defrauding their funders, which is the right thing to do, because nobody should defraud any other person in any sector. But the manner in which you go about it, I've not seen the business sector where people are deregistered, where people are blacklisted for lack of paying tax. I've not seen a regulator going to media center to make a ground announcement that these businesses are now blacklisted, you can't import, this clearing company is closed. They are closed every other time. Immigration, where people are looking for certificate of good conduct, many people don't get them. Look who would tell you here. But I've not seen an announcement. So I look at that as blackmail on the sector. Just 5 organizations, I don't know even any of them. I was reading the names for the first time. Many of them religious-based, like faith-based. Then you make that ground announcement to blackmail the sector. Because when you talk of civil society, maybe people don't reactionate, others know CCG, then they're like, hey, so you mean these people are defrauding? That impression really is not necessary.
Thank you. Look, you have quite a lot to possibly respond to. But also, right there, how do we, if in a way of response also, but also how do we curb issues of anxiety and fear that is ongoing with the citizens, with the ongoing, possibly the killings that are happening and the insecurity that is around? While you answer to that, you can also possibly get a response to that.
Well, first and foremost, my colleague here, Xavier, informed us that security begins with the citizens, and he's right about that. And I would like to inform you that we have never failed to collaborate with the citizens. Yes, we do have our challenges as the police, and the public also have their challenges about understanding the law, and also sometimes adhering to some of these rules and laws that govern the country. But we have never failed to cooperate with them whenever there is a necessity. There is always a challenge, like you have put it. Many of these are some cases that have been put forward in courts of law, and sometimes being thrown out, or sentences never coming in. And the problem is they always blame the police whenever. But when you take a case to court, you need to prove beyond reasonable doubt, and that beyond reasonable doubt is always challenged by someone, the defense lawyer. So that's why we always have issues with people saying cases are never conclusive. But you should know, when we are going in the court, we are not going for a straight path. There are challenges there you will always expect, and some of these cases are always thrown out. And unfortunately, we have a lot of contradicting laws. So I don't know what Parliament will do about that. A lot of proposals have been made. As the 10th Parliament was coming to an end, we saw a lot of laws being passed continuously. But we need to know also whether those laws will be beneficial, whether those laws are not contradicting with any laws that have been in existence. So I think we need to do a check on other organizations, on other agencies, on other
That's the role
political
of Law Reform Commission.
political people who are in charge of politics in this country, and some of the decisions that also make the country move on. So there's a lot to be done to calm down this anxiety, not to basically ask the police. Of course, we all know that whenever we are easily challenged in courts of law, whenever you feel police is infringing on your rights as a company, as a business, people have really challenged us in courts of law, and that is the benefit we have there. Unfortunately, I'm told they are no longer working, but within that time, as they plan to go back to work, you can always challenge the police where there is a necessity, and I think we comply with the decisions of court, and except for, I don't know whether there was a court order on your issues, but we always comply whenever there is a court order coming from court, so to act. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and look, now as we are turning towards conclusion, I also give also you'll give in your parting shots from here. I need to know what needs to be done to facilitate the enjoyment of these rights in Uganda.
I think, first of all, the enjoyment of the rights. Uganda is a nascent democracy. That's why, for some of us, we are at pains seeing this country make progress in moving forward, in putting in place legislation, in building institutions, but at the same time, seeing those institutions retrogress and infringe on the rights that are put in legislation and policy. That's the pain for us. So the first thing is that we need to build on what has already happened. The institutions have been set, maybe more need to be set up, but what we have is really sufficient, a starting point. The legislation that is being put in place, the constitution, should not be tinkered with unnecessarily, and other subsidiary legislation needs to ensure that they're speaking to the constitution. that done, the priority really is about creating awareness among citizens who are rights holders that this is not an entitlement. It's not something that is given to them by the state or a political leader and so on. The role of political leader, and including institutions such as police and Human Rights Commission, is to provide an environment for citizens to enjoy that. So that needs to be, that awareness is key in the public. What is the role of the police? How is a police supposed to function when they are managing public order? It is clear they have steps, for enforcement of, for use of force, actually. There are directives of use of force. In the Police Act, in their standing orders, they have clear directives. The uniform Afande Luke is putting on is actually an expression of force. It is the first expression of force. You don't use live bullets as a first resort, if I may use that one. It is your uniform appearing there, even without a gun, seeing police around in a crowd control issue is already enough. And then you go, they have microphones in their cars. They're supposed to announce, megaphones, that we are instructed under this law, okay, to manage this crowd, and we're giving you this period of time to disperse. And you cite the law. And then you go into use of other force that is not lethal. That's where the tear gas comes in. And then you graduate to shooting in the air and things like that. But
on the body.
Our police,
With the rubber bullets.
rubber bullets, and then live bullets only come in the air. But our police seem to come and they think that they drive cars and they pour this tear gas on people and things like that. So let citizens know the limitations of the powers the police have by the law, and the police should also be mindful of that. So that way there is respect created and the boundaries are clearly marked. And so I think that to ensure that we're observing those rights, first the citizens, some of whom have also resigned to fate because they have been, the environment created around them seem to think that this is a privilege to enjoy these rights, and they can only be ushered in, permission given by the police or by a certain politician somewhere. No, that's not the case. So citizens need to ensure that they take their rights seriously, and the duty bearers need to ensure that they also empower citizens in the enjoyment of those rights. I think together we can take this country to the next level of enjoyment of freedoms that makes this country more prosperous, even economically. I think that is an important dimension. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Xavier. Sarah?
In managing the public, there are two key issues. One is rule of law, and Xavier has talked about the law. And then the other key aspect is institutions. We have had acts as a country that seem to take away the legitimacy of institutions, especially key governance institutions. And that also puts the citizens, serving fellow citizens in these institutions, because we need to talk as one people. Beyond contestation for power, really, we are all Ugandans, and that's what unites us. So we have Ugandans serving us in several government institutions, but the legitimacy, these institutions, some of them have been delegitimized by particular acts of politicians. And that also we need to make sure that it ends and institutions are empowered to do the work they were set up to do. On the way the civil relations on public assemblies, without really going into the details of, normally what is forbidden becomes attractive. I don't want to talk about the forbidden fruit, but there is some attractiveness on something that is forbidden. And So when you forbid something, you make everybody to try to check what is this. And I will use an example. I will use an example of walk to work. You know, at the beginning of walk to work demonstrations, very brutal. Everybody was using force, all the actors. Then in between, the police adopted a strategy of escorting the political leaders that were walking. And that's how walk to work ended.
Yeah.
So once it ceased being forbidden, then there was no attractiveness. And I hope the police can keep drawing these lessons. Yeah, so I want to conclude at that the forbiddenness, attractiveness of the forbidden, and then when you let something free, the attractiveness ceases.
Joseph, look, give us the practice.
Absolutely not that. Absolutely not that. And I'm going to be a very serious law-abiding citizen, looking for, challenges, especially since I declared as a mini disclaimer, I've never had any issue directly with the law in this country officially. And so maybe there's something I'm not particularly enjoying. But that said, this country is possible. It's always reassuring to have you look here. And particularly, we said once upon a time while we were away that we missed you, and we missed you because you as an institution, you as an organization, and that seat, you are whoever occupies on your behalf, add something to this part of the conversation. But you particularly, the manner in which you actually come across, I must say that. And then, of course, today is a manifestation of that even more, that the more these issues are brought up, and we all learn together, and our citizens who are possibly in many cases less informed or perhaps less privileged. I can pick up a phone and call you to seek clarification. The better for us. So it will make life easy. I think I totally agree with Xavier on this, that there is something totally simpler around this question about basic rights of the citizens. And there are particular guys in politics who always tend to want to present that your freedom is a gift from us, and our jobs to protect you is sort of like a mini privilege. It's really not that. To the extent that, Xavier, I beat you by a few years, as I was starting the early part of my primary school, which is not so long ago, policing in this country, was not armed. Police officers were known, indeed, as you rightly say, for their uniforms and for police batons. So there are no arms. So meaning that it's actually very possible to not necessarily apply this, and so your presence alone would, in many cases, tend to really express your authority and allow people to deliver. And then finally, on behalf of organizations that tend to organize many of these events, most of the times I can assure you that when Sarah informs you that there's going to be a public event here, Sarah, in most cases, or at our offices, wherever they are, they in many cases know their responsibility, take care and responsibility for whatever event it is. All of us will want to have this event successful. Our intention would like to be about delivering whatever message, whatever we want to be able to do, that our guests come and they're happy, and that in many cases, and we want to be your friends next time and tomorrow. And there have been occasions when the more actually they contact you and then let go, say, it's coming from Sarah. So it is possible for us to be able to build relationships and to make sure that some of these things work. From my point of view, as I said, it's really not about us, it's very much about the guys whom sometimes give us guidance and guidelines. And since we are in a new term, we hope that new teams from the top up to the middle ranking that instruct you and others do it in such a manner that the focus is for our people and for our country in peace and security.
Thank you. Finally, Luke.
Well, it was a very good debate. I did learn quite a lot of things, and I do know that the public really has also a lot to learn from us. Like many of you bringing in examples on how this has happened to you in the different policing areas. like an example of yours, a lot of people have gone through that, even here in Uganda.
Yeah, I
so
know that. Yeah, yeah.
a lot of our police officers are also people. They know that humans will always make mistakes, and there are a lot of issues where, and it is allowed by the law, by the way, just to caution someone, and you're like, don't do this again. You move on. And it is something that, of course, we need to work on. The relationship between us and the public is something that we really need to work on. And it is a thing that we have always reminded our officers to do, to make sure that the relationship between them and the public is good. Because at the end of the day, they are our source of information. They are our source of taxes. At the end of the day, they facilitate the police. So if we don't safeguard them, if we don't work in harmony with them, there is bound to be an issue in the future. So what I can guarantee is that some of the things you have raised here are things that we are already working on, and we hope they will catch on very fast. And probably, like he said, people will also start appreciating us here home than appreciating us outside there. So, yeah, it is something. We do know that a lot of people appreciate the work we do, but we do know that there are also a lot of people that don't appreciate what we do because of some reasons they have within them, some experiences they have with specific officers or with the whole organization. That is all I can say.
Thank you very much, Luke, and thank you for appreciating the space of Civic Space TV and always showing up. Thank you, Xavier, also for honoring our invitation.
Thank you.
Sarah, Joseph, my always regular panelists who are always here, thank you very much. And to you, the citizens out there, thank you very much for being part of the conversation today. We meet next week in the same space. Also, kindly follow this discussion on our YouTube channel, live, Facebook Live. But while at YouTube, kindly subscribe and be part of this conversation happening every week. Thank you very much. We meet next week.